This week's lesson is on the Rock of Ages, and it's easy when we look at all these symbols of Christ to just get caught up in the cliches of things and just say, well, yes, we've got to build on the rock, and if we're built on the rock, then when the tempest comes, we won't be moved, and if we don't build on the rock, then we'll be swept away. Well, what does all that really mean in practical living? It's all good and well to read all the symbols and illustrations, but it's easy to miss actually what the practical lessons are for us to glean from. And just in the introduction, I want to draw our attention to this statement. It says, "The tempest of temptation and trial cannot move the building that is riveted to the eternal rock." So the question that I have, that when I came to this lesson, the question that I really actually wanted to understand is, what does it mean to be built on Christ so that you cannot be moved in a time that the Bible says is a time such as never was since there was a nation? So you just reflect on history. Our world has seen some really bad times, bad days. But we're actually heading into a time that the world has never experienced before, a time of trouble such as never was. Our wildest imaginations can't even grasp it. And I'm meant to be building on this rock, this cliche, build on this rock. So, and if I build on the rock, then in this tremendous tempest, I won't be moved. How does that actually work? How can I understand what it means to build on the rock, and how that building on the rock will actually make me practically survive the worst experience our world has ever seen? That's the question that I really wanted to answer for myself, and I'm just sharing this with you. These are the blessings I've gained out of the lesson, and I hope you gain some too. If you don't relate to everything here, study the lesson yourself and get your own blessing from it. I'm just sharing what has become meaningful to me. And so as I had this question, what does this really mean? And I was talking with the brothers about this, and Brother Michael made a really interesting testimony or an experience he related of what it means for him. And he said that when he goes through his current trials, which is all we can base it on at this point, that he has to reflect upon his knowledge of God before the trial actually came. So he would reflect, say for instance, on the creation of the world and the power of God through creation. And as he reflects upon that, because that's not related to his feelings, he then applies that into his current scenario and understands, well, if the Lord has done that in the past, then what can he do for me today? And when he shared that, it really touched me, because that's exactly, I believe, part of this building on the rock, knowing the foundation, even from the foundation of the world, what the Lord has done through the power of his word, and actually what it does in the practical life. And it was really illustrated in question 5. Question 5 speaks about the smitten rock. From the smitten rock in Horeb first flowed the living streams that refreshed Israel in the desert. So as you reflect on God's power, what he has done through prophecy, through his atoning sacrifice, through the creation of the world, all these landmarks of God's tokens of love and care and stability to us, as we reflect upon them and then apply those principles to the current suffering we actually have at the time, it actually supplies a comfort. And that's exactly what Brother Michael was explaining, that it's comforting, but not just comforting, it's strengthening. And the illustration is beautiful when you think of, well, if you're walking in the desert and you're tired, you're feeling like you're wasting your time and you know ready to give up and die. But you come to this rock and out comes this water. This rock that was there before you were ever suffering, and then you take from that rock something that will refresh you, that gives you comfort and strength. And in that sense, you are drinking from the fountain. And in the last paragraph under question 5, it says, it was Christ, by the power of his word, that caused the refreshing stream to flow for Israel. The power of the word. Our experience with the Bible, not just as something that's happened, but an application to my current situation. A testimony that I can give is that I've had really, difficult times and struggles and trials in my own life, and I've come to church and I've sat down and I've heard a message. Now, I know that the preacher doesn't know my circumstance because I haven't said anything to anyone. But as I hear, it is so applicable. It's like the preacher knew what I was suffering, except they don't. It was actually the word of the Lord coming through. And so many times I have come to church or prayer meeting and I've been discouraged or downhearted, and I've sat down, I've prayed before the Lord, asked for a blessing, and the power of his word came, and it was like just drinking a cold cup of water on a hot day, and you just feel, that is so much better. These are the practical experiences that these cliches or this building on the rock or drinking from Christ actually refer to. And so if we look at question 7, question 7 speaks of building on this rock, but actually falling on the rock and being broken. Because if you remember the statement I read in the introduction, it says, the tempest of temptation and trial cannot move the building that is riveted to the eternal rock. So this riveting experience has to do with falling on the rock and being broken. But how many of us actually like that experience? Or how many of us relate the humbling experiences that we go to actually, hey, rejoice in this suffering, rejoice in this humiliation that I'm going through, because this is actually part of falling on the rock. If you look at question 7 and the last note under question 7, it says, to fall on the rock and be broken is to give up our self-righteousness and to go to Christ with the humility of a child, repenting of our transgressions and believing in his forgiving love. And then in the statement before that, in the paragraph before, it says, self must be dethroned. Pride must be humbled. If we would know the glory of the spiritual kingdom. How many of us like to be humiliated? So just say you're in a church committee meeting, for instance, or you're in a church meeting, and as you're there, another man comes up and just accuses you or just lays out all the faults that they've seen in you from the day they met you, and just really humiliates you in front of everybody. What's the human reaction? The human reaction is to not think of this lesson and think, oh, hang on, I'm actually being humiliated here. Here's the experience of falling on the rock and being broken. Often these thoughts are far from us at the time of being humiliated. Say someone's gossiping about me and talking all about me, and I feel terrible. Even if what they're saying is right or wrong, it's irrespective. It doesn't matter. Because the sense of being humiliated awakens a reaction inside of me to walk away or defend myself. I'm either going to just turn my back and say, forget you all, leave, or start defending and justifying myself. And all these are natural reactions that stop us falling on the rock, because naturally we don't want to break. Pride doesn't want to break. And it's interesting, in question 3, it just made this statement in the middle paragraph in question 3. It says, the Apostle Peter, writing by inspiration of the Holy Spirit, clearly shows to whom Christ is a foundation stone and to whom a rock of offense. So there's two ways to relate to the trials that Christ sends us. When Christ puts us through humiliation, we can either respond to that as a foundation and say, all right, I'm going to break? Wasn't Christ humiliated when he was accused before the Sanhedrin and before Pilate and before Herod for so-called things he did? What did he say? Did he justify himself? No, he didn't. Did he walk away and leave? No, he didn't. He actually suffered quietly and committed himself to the Lord. This is the breaking on the rock, the smitten rock, if you like. And so there's two reactions. There's a human reaction, which makes Christ a rock of offense. We actually get offended at the process of humiliation, or we go with it and be broken. But notice that when we break on the rock, it's the only way to become riveted on the rock. When we come to this point of self-abnegation, if you look at question 3, look at what it says about the rock. I like this question, it's really nice. Christ is a tried stone. Those who trust in him, he never disappoints. He has borne every test. He has endured the pressures of Adam's guilt. Adam's guilt. Think of that. Adam has messed up. He had perfection. He had Eden. He had the world in a beautiful state. Everything was in perfect harmony. And through his decision, conscious decision, everything became cursed. And the guilt that he would have experienced, and not just of seeing what the world has done, but even when he related to his own offspring, every human being on the planet that he saw was his child. And many of them were ungodly. The line of Cain. And so, I mean, just imagine, here's Adam walking along and he sees, one of his offspring in the garden sweating away, tilling the soil and getting a sore back or some, sweat of his brow, and he turns out and says, "Thanks a lot, Adam. Thanks. Now I'm sweating here because of what you've done." And this would have gone on for his whole life. The pressure, if you stop to think, the pressure of Adam's guilt. And here the statement says Christ can endure it. So even if you have done things wrong and people are accusing you and bringing all your bad history back to you like humans do, you can just rest on the Lord. And it is painful when you have made a mistake, honest mistake, you've done wrong and you say, well, I've got no excuse, I have no way of justifying myself, and people just keep reminding you, gossiping about what you've done and spreading abroad what you've done, and then people just start hating you because of what you've done. All you can do is say, Lord, you are my only foundation. This experience is building on the rock. This experience will make you riveted, so when the time of trouble comes, self is absolutely shattered. What else can upset you? People treat you like dirt. That's okay, because I'm broken on the rock and I'm dirt anyway. And if it wasn't for the Lord, I would have no hope. But my hope is on the Lord. And the amazing thing is, you don't have to be good to be accepted by Jesus. He accepts sinners. And as you come to him and do this is the preparation in all of life's different trials. We come to the Lord and say, Lord, you are my only source of help. And we rest, we place the weight of our burden, our guilt, our suffering on the Lord. It continues, it says, he has endured the pressure of Adam's guilt and the guilt of his posterity, and has come off more than conqueror of the powers of evil. He has borne the burdens cast upon him by every repenting sinner. In Christ, the guilty heart has found relief. He is the sure foundation. All who make him their dependence rest in perfect security. That is an experience that we need to endeavor to make. When I'm challenged through and often most of our biggest trials come from relationships, spouse, husbands or wives, the trials there, or within the church, or within brothers or sisters or relatives, they often produce some of the biggest trials that we have. And when I come to the Lord, I can actually have perfect security. And at this point, I can start living out the principles of the law. Only at this point can I do this. It's so important to understand this point. To be able to be obedient and follow God's law requires me to first break on the rock, come to full acknowledgement of my guilt and my failings, and actually break that on the rock and say, Lord, you are my only hope. Allow the comfort of the Lord and His word to refresh me, and then I can start acting the principles of God's law. What does it mean? Look in question 3. It says, the great principles of the law, of the very nature of God, are embodied in the words of Christ on the Mount. What's he talking about? He's talking about the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount are the very nature of the law, the very nature of God. You recall the Sermon on the Mount? The Sermon on the Mount is all about blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. It shows this, it starts off, the Sermon on the Mount starts off with a person who has broken on the rock. And then it goes into how to deal with people in relationships. It talks about when your brother is angry, if you feel angry with your brother, or all through it, you look at it, how if someone judges you and so on and so on. The whole Sermon on the Mount was the 10 Commandments applied into relationships. And you want to look at every aspect of it. It's incredible. You've heard it said of old time, an eye for an eye and a tooth for tooth. But I say unto you, love your enemies, do good to those that spitefully use you and persecute you and hate you. And how to respond to people who are actually giving you so much grief. And the Lord finishes His Sermon on the Mount with the illustration of the rock. He says, he that heareth these words, these words were relating to the Sermon on the Mount. He that heareth these words, the Sermon on the Mount, how to relate to your enemies, and does them, will be likened to a man who built his house upon the rock. So it actually boils down to, how do I relate with people who hate me? Oh, easy to love your friends, easy to love those who love you. But how do you relate to those who hate you, those who bring up all your past, who just slam you down for everything you've ever done? And most of it is legitimately wrong. You've done wrong. Like Jacob, he was wrong. He did wrong. What could he say? This experience is so practical. It's unbelievable. And, well, it is believable. We have to believe it. If we believe on the Lord and His way He wants to lead us, we will not be confounded in the last days. And just to conclude with one statement just at this point, it says here, Christ, the Word, the revelation of God, the manifestation of His character, His law, His love, His life, is the only foundation upon which we can build a character that will endure. So the question I started with was, what does it practically mean to build on the rock that actually makes me survive the worst time in world's history? The time when brother will be against brother, and everyone, all egocentric self-defense will come into play to create this strife that the world has never seen on such a scale. If we learn to love our enemies, love those that hate us, and this can only be done when we've broken on the rock and put all the weight of our guilt and our sufferings and our trials onto the Lord, and acknowledged and tasted of His peace and His love and His unconditional support for those who rest upon Him, then we can do this. And this is what it means to build our character that will endure. I pray you've received a blessing from this Sabbath School video. Please, there's many more aspects in the lesson to cover, and I pray you'll gain a rich blessing as you dig deep. God bless you.